Right. Um, we're going to talk a little bit tonight about phrasing. So, if you're a piper, you probably heard the expression uttered somewhere in your journey of piping about phrasing. Some people say, hey, let's make sure we get the phrasing right on this. I think in many instances, there's different interpretations of what phrasing is. So, I'm going to tonight, I'm going to try and give you a reasonable explanation so you understand the background to why we do phrasing and what the context of it is and why on bagpipes it's probably slightly different to other instruments. But anyways, let's first start with the actual reason behind phrasing. Okay. And this is quite simple. Music is like anything else, any other form of communication. It's a little bit like language. There's also a lot of maths in music as well. And so it's got a very sort of structured pattern. And in fact, most Western and Eastern music, in fact, almost any music is written in 8 bars, which is kind of one of those weird mathematical things. Okay. Now, when you're communicating using a language like English, we're talking now at the moment, when you talk to somebody, you tend to use, figures of speech, you tend to use parentheses, you tend to use exclamation marks, question marks, punctuation, that kind of stuff to create context. And from context comes meaning. So if you're talking to somebody, you're able to convey a message. Okay. And so this is really no different when it comes to music. So let's start with some basic concepts of phrasing. Let's look at some other instruments for starters. So let's take something like a piano. Okay, a piano is a percussion instrument. Okay, the hammer strikes a string, and the string makes a sound. Okay, it also has a damper pedal, which will mute the sound, and it has a pedal which sustains the sound. Okay, so it's two pedals on the bottom. In piano music, typically phrases are written with a line across the top of it, and it's a way of indicating that this passage of notes is a musical concept. It's a phrase. And typically the way that a phrase is expressed on the piano is to hold down the sustain pedal, and then that sustains the notes. So the notes ring out, okay? And they kind of form together into a passage. If you play the notes all independently with nothing in between them, or with the damper pedal off, there are passages of music that do that, like staccato, for example, where the notes are very short and sharp. But in the vast majority of cases, the way that the phrasing is done is using the sustain pedal. At the end of the phrase with the piano, you lift the pedal, and then that creates it ends that sustaining effect, and then you drop the pedal for the next phrase, and that creates a new sustaining effect for that phrase. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's take now the pipe band. Okay, let's talk about the drums, the side drums and the bass. The side drums and the bass will typically use accentuation to create the phrases. And the way that this is done is that they strike the first note in the phrase passage, typically, harder than the other notes. Okay, so if we're taking a 3/4 tune, like the one I'm going to go through tonight, they'll play the first bar, the first beat of the first phrase. They'll play it quite hard, so it'll be 1 2 3 1 2 3. Okay, the phrasing in the Scottish Soldier, which you're going to look at tonight with 3/4, is 2-bar phrasing. It can be interpreted in other ways, but typically it's 2-bar phrasing. And a nice thing about using this tune as an example is there are actually words to the Scottish Soldier. So if you hop onto the internet, go to Google, the first search result that comes up for the lyrics will actually show you the lyrics depicted in phrases. They're actually line by line. Each line is a phrase. And so it's not written where it's just a long string of words together without context. Each line is in fact a phrase. So if we take the first 4 lines of the words, they are, there was a soldier, a Scottish soldier. That's the first phrase. Second phrase, who wandered far away. Third phrase, and soldiered far away. And the fourth phrase, there was none bolder. So that basically is the first 4 phrases. Okay, and in fact it's the first part of Green Hills, 8 bars. So if we didn't use phrasing, you probably, and I'm going to test you on this now, if I read all those words end to end without stopping or any kind of interpretation in the way that I expressed that, I'm guessing that you probably wouldn't remember too many of the words or concepts that came through that. You might only remember something about a Scottish soldier. So here goes. There was a soldier, a Scottish soldier, who wandered far away and soldiered far away, there was none bolder. Quite hard to remember the key concepts there, but in fact there are 4 key concepts. 1, there was a Scottish soldier. 2, he wandered far away. 3, he soldiered far away. And 4, there was none bolder. So there's 4 distinct concepts there. The music should actually follow the same pattern. Okay, so we don't want to be playing the music without the phrasing, because the music is interpreted very much in the same way, believe it or not, probably on a more subconscious level. So here's the thing. Bagpipe phrasing, playing the bagpipe instrument, is probably a little bit different to percussion instruments and other instruments where you can stop. So take a non-percussion instrument, which is similar to bagpipes, an oboe, which has a double reed as well. So there's quite a lot of similarities there. An oboe, you can play a phrase and then you can stop blowing, and what happens is the sound stops. So it's the very same effect as lifting the sustain pedal on the piano. Okay, it creates no sound, and then you drop the pedal again, you're playing the notes, sound comes again. You can do the same on a wind instrument like the oboe. Bagpipes, because it has a bag attached, it's a monotone instrument, so the only thing that you'll hear is the constant steady sound that flows through that. So in a way, you're kind of set up to fail, because it's very difficult to use sustain, because you can't create breaks between the phrases. You can't stop your bagpipes and restart them again for the next phrase. That's the first thing. The second thing is also very difficult to create accentuation. So you can't play a note louder than another note in context, because all the notes are the same volume, roughly. So that's a challenge, right? And so the way that we do that in piping is we use a little bit of poetic license. And this is very subtle and it can't be taken too far. But in essence, what we do is we tend to take the first beat of the phrase and we'll pulse that a little bit, tiny bit more than it's actually written. Okay, but not so much that you need to now rewrite it. So you're not going to add a double dot and a double tail to make this right. You're going to be in between that scenario and the way it is actually written, which is a single dot quaver and a semi-quaver to tail. So what we do then is, instead of playing dum ba bra, dum ba bra, dum ba bra, okay, which is the way it's written, we're going to just pulse that low A a tiny bit more. I call it an ABC because it's a lot of 3/4s follow this pattern, by the way. You'll hold the A a touch more than it should be, you'll cut the B a touch more than it should be, and play it into the C. Okay, that will create the effective volume, because perceptually you're perceiving that to be accentuated, put it that way, in relation to the other notes. So how do you play that? It'll be dum ba bra, dum ba bra. Okay, you can hear I'm trying to sort of say it at the same sound level, but in essence the accentuation that's perceived from that comes through. So that's the first thing. The second thing is at the end of the phrase. In this case, when we're talking about Scottish soldier, 3/4, it's a 2-bar phrase. It's after 6 beats basically, right? Because it's a 3/4, 3 beats per bar. When you get to the end of the phrase, there's a part called the passing passage. Okay, so passing means it's passing between phrases. So phrase 1 into phrase 2, there's a passage of passing. And typically there's a passing note or passing notes in between those 2 phrases. And that's your opportunity when you're playing bagpipes. Not, for the drummers it's different. They know that they've just got to come back and get that first beat in the next phrase spot on to create the accentuation. For a pianist, for example, they just got to lift the pedal, hit the next phrase. For bagpipes, we don't have those tools. So when we get to that passing note, A, you need to be aware of it, and I'll tell you how to do that. And then B, you need to make a few little adjustments to once again create that sort of, I think of it as like the lifting and dropping of the pedal, that lift and drop effect. And the idea here is whilst the drummers are going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, the pipers over the top of that will be going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, right? So you get that type of effect. And how it's done is when you get to the passing phrase, for this tune specifically, it's a little bit different to others perhaps in this regard. The key message really is quite simple. You need to hold that last note in the phrase, okay, at the sixth beat in this case. You need to give that the absolute full value before you go into the next beat of the phrase, of the second phrase. Many pipers don't think about it, so A, they're not aware of it, and B, they tend to just sort of unconsciously pass through that passage. So they'll either hit the first beat of the next phrase a tiny bit too early or a tiny bit too late. And it's because they're not aware of it firstly, as I said, but they're not setting themselves up to create that dropping in on the first beat perfectly. And for this tune, the easiest way to do that, as I said, is just holding that beat right until the last possible minute. It's like hanging on the end of the cliff with your fingers, and then when you hit the next beat, bang, you let go and go into the next phrase. Cool. So I think that's clear. Now I'm going to give an example of how to actually practice this, and this is just a practice routine. It's not something you want to do all the time because it's incorrect. It's not the way the music's written, but it's going to raise your awareness of where the phrasing is in this tune. And then when you play it the correct way, if you're aware of it, you're going to be more likely to then go, wait, this bit's important. I need to make sure that I'm getting this note exactly right to go into the next phrase on the first beat. Bang on with the drummers. And then you get that really nice effect if you're playing in a pipe band, you know, that all of the groups are coming together and landing together on the first beat, and you're getting that flow of the music coming through. So here's how we do that. So we'll take the Scottish Soldier. So the first phrase, as I said, it's the first 2 bars, it's 6 beats. And what we'll do is when we get to the 6th beat, we're going to hold that note for 1 extra beat. Okay. Before we go there though, we're going to start by actually practicing the tune-in phrases. So we're going to take the first phrase, you're going to play it with your practice chanter. When you get to the 6th beat, you play that 6th beat until the last possible minute before you stop blowing, because now you're on a practice chanter, you can actually cut out. Okay, so you can play it and you get right to the end of that 6th note and go all the way to the end and then stop. Okay, and then that's raising your awareness of where that passing note is. Okay, so here's the example. You see, I held it right to the end and I stopped. Okay, so that's the first phrase. You can do the same with the second phrase. Right, and then the next phrase is just a repeat of the first phrase, and the last phrase is similar to the second phrase. It's just got the cadence at the end, the low A or the B, whatever it is. Same applies. So just practice those individually with the metronome, and then let the metronome keep ticking, stop, pick it up again, play the first phrase all the way to the end, stop. Right, so that's the first thing you want to do. The second thing then now is to overdo the passing note. So that, in other words, play that passing note for an extra beat. Playing it with the metronome and then going into the second phrase afterwards. So you don't stop, you play all the way to the end of the first phrase, you hold an extra beat, go into the second phrase. You don't want to do this all the time, as I said. This is just to raise your awareness. So when you play it, you finish that and you start playing it again normally. Once your awareness is there, you're thinking about that first note in the phrase and the passing note towards the end of the phrase, you're going to be doing it right because you're aware of it. Okay, so here's how you would do that. Can't do circular breathing, otherwise I'll just keep going for your amusement, but you get the point, right? So that's how that's done, and do it with the metronome, with your practice chanter. So do it like that a couple times, maybe for 10 minutes or something like that, and then go back to the normal tune, play it the normal way, and you should notice that you'll now be more aware of that. The first note in the phrase, the passing note in the phrase, getting exactly right so you can drop into the first beat of the next phrase perfectly in time with the drummers or with any other instruments you're playing with. And that is the fundamental start of phrasing. From there, you'll develop some other skills around different tunes. Luckily, in bagpipes, there's only a handful of different variety of tunes. You've got sort of marches and those sorts of things, and then you've got stratospheres, dancing tunes, reels, hornpipes, and jigs. And phrasing applies to all of those. It's all just different phrasing rules, I suppose, for them. And also, there's some level of independent interpretation. You can, I suppose, play around a little bit with that, but by and large, the phrasing is typically pretty clear. It's almost logical, and that just seems to be it's one of those universal things about music, I guess. So thanks for watching, and I hope this helps. And I'll get on to the next lesson on stratosphere phrasing.